Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Josh, I hear you have the topic today.
I do have the topic today. And before we get started, I also want to thank those listeners who wished me a happy birthday on our last episode. That was very nice. Thank you guys.
That is nice.
Yeah, our listeners are the best.
I was just going to say the same thing. Did you know we have the best listeners?
They're pretty great, especially the ones who regularly interact. So if you don't regularly interact, you should start regularly interacting so that we know how amazing you are.
That's true. That's true.
It's not that you're not amazing. It's just we don't know it.
We just don't know you yet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Fun. Yeah, I do have an idea for today. And I was telling Kim before we started recording, I was like, here's the problem with my idea. It's kind of about perspective. And we talk about perspective a lot. And so I was almost hesitant to bring it just because I know it's a topic, or it's not the details of it, but the general idea of it is something that we talk about regularly. And it's just the idea of the way you choose to see an event or choose to see your life or anything has so much to do with how you interact with it from there on out. And in some way, like, I don't know. I mean, I suppose if it's a very personal situation, it will really change it. If it's a global situation, it may not actually change how it plays out that much. But so the example that I was thinking about was, I think I've said before that my wife Bree and I have been watching the Chosen series as the new season 4 as it is being released, and they were doing like 2 episodes a week. It's now fully out, so we finished the season finale. I won't give anyone any spoilers.
Spoiler, it's already written. Most people have probably already read it.
I did laugh at that because season 4 ends with Jesus riding on a donkey, and in the post episode interview, the character Jonathan, who plays Jesus, he goes, yeah, and it was fun, getting to do that for season 5. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? They don't know that yet. That's a spoiler. And he was like, nobody thinks that's a spoiler. Like, he goes, everybody knows that happened. Most people know what's going to happen. But I do think what's interesting, and I don't know why The Chosen hijacked this part of our conversation, but they changed their distributor, and they're now they're on Netflix, and they're going to be on Peacock and 2 other ones, which I don't remember, as well as they have their own app. And they did all their live streams on YouTube. And so they're really expanding their reach. And so it is actually plausible now that there might be people who come across it who don't actually know the story. And I think that could be fun for them. That could be really cool.
That's cool. That's a whole new way to deliver the gospel, isn't it?
It is a whole new way. But
without even having to have the personal, oh, you're a sinner.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's very interesting way, and it makes it a lot more relatable. And I know they take creative and artistic liberties, and they don't get everything correct. And I don't think they're trying to. They're trying to get the general story accurate and then make it a TV show. It's not just supposed to be thus saith the Lord Bible. And I really appreciate that about how they've done it. But part of it stirred my mind in this because Jesus has some conversations with his mom where he's kind of talking about his humanity and how he deals with everything that everyone else is dealing with. And I think when we read that in the Bible, it's sort of just like, oh yeah, Jesus felt everything we felt. Okay. But to like watch a show where they like show him feeling the emotions, um, it just adds a different layer to it. And there's it's not just his emotions, but it's the emotions that they put into the other people in the villages the or in the like the Romans or just the other Jews or whatever it is. And I think that that's really powerful to like actually kind of humanize it a little bit and be like, oh yeah, what, like we read that and it's so easy to read, but what would that actually mean? Um, and then to be like, well, how come some people thought he was the Messiah and some people didn't? And I was like, well, that's just their perspective. Like that was the perspective, that was the lens through which they saw this individual. And I can see how it would be easy not to, because we read the Bible years later and we're like, oh, there was this sign in the sky and these people came and um and then Herod had all the baby boys killed. And so it's like, of course we would know that there's this something happening. But if you just looked at the situation from the surface without having an angel come and tell you what's happening, then your choice is to believe the words of the parents and the sign in the sky, if you even have the understanding to perceive the sign in the sky. Or the other example is this is an illegitimately born baby, and that's all it is. And the difference between what really made people stand out was, did they see the earthly circumstance of an what would have appeared as an illegitimately born baby, or did they see past that and see the potential and see like God's hand in that situation? Because that's really the only difference, and that's purely perspective,
Mhm.
except for the instances where angels came and said, hey guys, this is what's happening. But everyone else had to just believe. And I think that's pretty wild that something so major for most people just appeared on the surface so simple. And it made me go, man, that probably happens on a daily basis, or at least maybe like every 100 years, something super significant happens and we all miss it. Or, I don't know. It just is like, man, that would have been so easy to miss being someone who lived in Israel.
Hmm. I I think it's really interesting to think about it that way. And I do think it happens all the time because I mean, you and I, we've even been part of like a collective kind of receiving of a message
Mm,
from the Lord that we needed to like act upon and
mm-hmm.
rely on other people to believe what we'd heard, right? To then act upon it as well. And it was, I mean, for some people, it was crazy. For some people, it was like, if you believe it, I believe it. And for other
Mm-hmm.
people, it was like, if you're saying it, I'll take it back to the Lord and check it myself. And for others, it was like, yeah, I'm I'm not down with that. And all of them, I'm sure there were people who had all of those points of view with very similar backgrounds and upbringings,
Right.
and I know that that's not the first time that's ever happened. I don't know that we're actually unique in that. I think it just happened to be that time we happened to be the recipients of this word. Um, but I mean, even then, you have to think about it. Like, if you're postured in a way to receive and believe, you will.
Mm.
And if you're not, chances are you'll go on living your life as you always have. And you may even see the sign in the sky, but you'll decide for whatever reason that that's not what they were talking about, or
Mhm.
this isn't the sign. We just had this conversation a couple weeks ago about Revelation,
Mm.
the book of Revelation, and how people have interpreted the Antichrist and the end of days and all of these different things over and over throughout the last 2,000 years. Like, it's happening now. Well, but it's happening now. But not then, but now. Right? But does that mean that any of it is wrong? Or does it mean that any of it is right? And I think that's a wild thing too. And for me, I tend to think the only way to really know is to be kind of in that third people group I was talking about, who goes, okay, you heard it. I'll take it back to the Lord and check it.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think that's our responsibility with everything. I think it should be our like go-to response. Um, Even when a doctor says this is your diagnosis, or someone says you should take this supplement, or someone says um, like this is my favorite TV show, like you should watch it. Like no matter if it's like serious or not, you should like going and testing it and checking with the Lord probably should be your first response. And I'm not telling you if a doctor says you have something serious to not take it serious, but like ask the Lord, like maybe how to proceed, because there's probably multiple paths of how to approach whatever situation it is, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's picking something to watch on Netflix or a health issue or whatever it is. Like there's probably multiple ways to approach it, and that I think is um that's a really important piece of the puzzle, is just how do you approach the situation. Because like to my example about was Jesus, do you see Jesus as an illegitimate baby or the Messiah? Like even if you even if a friend was like, oh, that guy, that's the Messiah, like, well, what's your role? Like, what are you supposed to do about that? Like, are you supposed to drop everything and go follow him? Well, maybe, but not everybody was called to do that. Some people supported his mission in different ways. Some people were like came to listen to him speak, but didn't like dive in that way. And I don't like, I don't know that that's from lack of commitment as much as it is like not everybody was meant to be one of the 12 disciples. Like, it wouldn't have been possible. I think Jesus had his hands full discipling 12 people at the same time, let alone trying to do that with a bunch more.
That's funny. You know what else I think about within the context of this conversation, and kind of that importance of perspective, and even the importance of going and taking it back to the Lord. I think about the story of Abraham and Isaac, and then Ishmael as well. And I mean, you see the breaking off of two of the world's major religions
Mhm.
from one word of God that they all believed, for the record. They all believed it.
Yeah.
But one believed it was outworked this way, and one believed it was outworked this way. And it has, like, I mean, how many thousands of years later is it now? But even just that, what if it wasn't left to merely interpretation?
Mm.
What if it was going and taking that back to the Lord and saying, what are you saying about this? What do I need to know about this? And maybe they did. And maybe it needed to split. I don't know, because I haven't asked about it and I'm not going to pretend like I know. Um, but I think that's a big one,
Mm-hmm.
and it really is about perspective. And at that point, there's a belief on both sides. And it is like a hard and fast belief that yes, God said this, but it was outworked this way. Yes, God said the same thing, but it was outworked this way. And I just wonder, would there have been, would there have even been the splitting off had it
Mm.
not been purely reliant upon just believing the word and interpreting how it was being outworked? Or maybe they all did have enough of that relationship that they took it back to the Lord. And
Yeah.
maybe it did need to have a couple branches come off of it. I have no idea. And I know that I might get like roasted for even suggesting such a thing. But I'm not going to, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to have to take that back to the Lord and ask him myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know. I think we're getting to a point where it's not worth the assumption, because I don't know that assumptions will draw you closer in relationship. I think sometimes they can cause separation sometimes. And I
Mm.
think sometimes they can cause you to go down a path that wasn't ideal. Not that none of it can be redeemed, because I actually believe that any of it can be redeemed. But what if you stuck to the ideal?
Mm.
You know?
I think, well, so what you're talking about, like in how you see it, so much of that is the voice you're listening to. Like, are you believing something somebody else told you about it? Or are you actually forming your own thought about it? And I think that's something that is becoming harder and harder to do because we are surrounded by content and
Yeah.
opportunity to hear someone else's opinion. If you search something on any browser now, you get a AI summary of it. So you're getting an automated opinion of what you searched. And really, the only way for you to figure out for yourself is to get really good at asking yourself questions and asking yourself consistent questions. And because that's how you form an opinion, that's how you form a belief. And I wonder sometimes, like, when people have been in religious systems their whole life and then something happens and they get really shaken and they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. Sometimes I wonder, like, well, was your belief system really yours, or was it, or were you just in a culture, were you just in a culture where this is the things you did and the songs you sang and the books you read, but was it actually yours? And if it was actually yours, why did you choose it? Like, have you asked yourself those questions and have you really sat with it and come to your own conclusions? And then, like, I think once you start to do that in your life, it's easier to do that with little things. Like, instead of just saying, oh, I watched the presidential debate and then I watched the highlights that my favorite, like, news organization put out. And from there, I form my opinion on whether I thought Trump or Biden did better. Or did you, like, watch pieces of it for yourself or the whole thing for yourself and then sit and say, well, now which do I actually think? Like, who do I think handled this question better? Like, whose opinion do I like better, and why do I like that opinion better? Is it because that's what the news network that I grew up watching said was what I was supposed to like? or do I actually believe that's the better thing? And I think all that ties back into like the Jesus as legitimate or illegitimate, like as from the people in that culture. Like if they were good at asking themselves questions instead of just like getting caught up in the hype of a situation or believing like, do you believe the religious groups who thought he should be killed, or did you believe the religious groups who kind of thought he had a purpose, or did you believe the radicals who thought he was coming to overthrow Rome? Like, what was like? Did you just believe it, or did you like? What was your thought about it? And that changes how you interacted with him, and that changed who he was to you. I don't know. I just ranted for a while.
No, I think it's good. And I don't think it's the easiest thing to do either.
No,
I mean,
not today for sure.
Peter, his closest friend, although I've heard that John would say he's the number one, but I always thought Peter was the closest, right? I mean, Peter denied him. He was like, I could never. But then faced with something, he was like quick to be like, yeah, not me,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it just goes to kind of show how easily someone can be swayed when
Mm-hmm.
they're not having, when they're not directly connected to the source at the time, I suppose. And that could be good or bad. People have been in cults, and when they're in the cult, they believe this wholeheartedly, and they are there 24/7, and that's all they're surrounded with. So they believe it because it's what they're influenced by. But then also, once they step out of it, they start seeing things from a different perspective and maybe completely influenced differently. And it's not because of a weak mind. It is because I think sometimes you've got to figure out what your source is and stick with it, And I don't know, for me, my source is, I go through Yeshua, but it is Yahweh. It is the Father. It is God. And I know that there are some that it is simply the church they go to, or it is just the one pastor they listen to on repeat every day of the week, whatever it might be. But I guess I just wonder, how far away from the source is the voice that you're listening to? And I think this is also why there's the scripture that says, do not despise prophecy, but test everything. I think it's because he's going to be talking to a lot of different people, and there will be a lot of words from him that come to you, but it's your responsibility to take it back to him to make sure that it's for you. And that's kind of the only way to do it, is to go to the source.
Yeah. I think the source it's kind of like your filter. Like it's how you filter the information and process it. And as you grow in relationship with your source, whether your source is CNN or the Father, like as you grow in relationship with your source, you start to see things through your source's lens. So as you grow in relationship with your creator, you will start to see the world through the eyes of your creator. And that's, I think, our highest purpose, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Good topic, Josh.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing it up. I wonder what our listeners think. I wonder if we've rubbed anyone the wrong way. I wonder if we've put a voice to something that they've always thought but didn't want to say. I'd be curious to hear some feedback on this one.
I would be too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, guys, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.